My wife laughed when I said I needed therapy, so I got it. Found myself, found peace, and left her in the past where she belongs now. I'm a 29-year-old guy who never thought I'd be here. I remember when I first met her. It was like something out of a movie. We laughed all night, had endless conversations about everything and nothing, and I thought we'd figured it all out. At the start, our marriage felt perfect. It was everything I'd ever wanted, loving, easy, and full of potential. But somewhere along the way, it all started to unravel. I couldn't pinpoint when it happened, but I started to feel like I was living with a stranger. We weren't talking anymore. Not really. It wasn't that we fought, no, that would have been easier. We just stopped communicating. I felt like I was walking through life on autopilot. And when I tried to talk to her, she was distant. Like I was just another part of the background. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, but I didn't know what. I wasn't happy, but I didn't know why. Every day felt like I was losing a piece of myself, and the worst part? I had no idea how to fix it. So, after a lot of sleepless nights, I worked up the courage to say something. I told her I was thinking about going to therapy. I wanted to understand what was happening to me, to us. I thought maybe we could find a way to get back to the way we were. She laughed. I can't even describe the sting of that sound. It wasn't just a chuckle. It was like she was mocking my pain. It was as if I had asked her to believe in some ridiculous fairy tale. She just laughed, and the worst part was, she didn't even seem to realize how much it hurt. "You really think therapy's gonna fix this?" she said, brushing it off like I had asked her to believe in ghosts. I just stood there, stunned. Her laughter hung in the air, and in that moment, I realized she wasn't the partner I thought she was. I felt small, like I had no right to ask for help, like my emotions didn't matter. It wasn't just that she didn't take me seriously, it was like I didn't even exist to her. I tried again a few days later. It wasn't like I wanted to keep bringing it up, but I had to. I needed to know if we could fix things or if I was just imagining it all. So, I sat down with her after dinner, hoping maybe this time we could have a real conversation. "Look, I've been thinking," I started, my voice shaking a little. "I don't know what's going on, but I feel like we're drifting apart. I don't want to feel this way anymore." Her eyes flicked to me briefly, then back to the TV. I could feel the space between us, stretching further by the second. "You're fine," she said, dismissively, not even pausing the show. "You're just overreacting, like always. Nothing's wrong." I swallowed hard. There it was again. The same words, the same indifferent tone. And each time she said it, I could feel the weight of her dismissal sinking deeper into me. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to make her see how badly I was hurting. But instead, I just sat there, numb. Like the words weren't even for me anymore. Every attempt to talk to her felt like hitting a brick wall. I could feel my frustration turning into something darker, something worse: self-doubt. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was just too sensitive. Was I blowing everything out of proportion? I started wondering if it was me. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was just an emotional mess. I started to question everything about myself. Maybe she was right. Maybe there was nothing wrong with her at all. Maybe I was the one who was broken. I didn't know anymore. The silence between us grew heavier, suffocating. I knew something wasn't right, but every time I reached out, I felt more and more invisible. And that's when the decision started to form in the back of my mind: if she wasn't going to see me, I'd have to see myself. I don't know what finally pushed me to make the appointment. Maybe it was the exhaustion, the feeling of being invisible, or just the weight of knowing that I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. But I reached a point where I knew I couldn't keep going like this, caught in this emotional limbo, trapped in a marriage where I didn't even feel like myself anymore. So, I picked up the phone and made the call. Therapy. It felt foreign, like something out of a self-help book or a movie. But I knew it was my only chance to figure out what was happening to me. But as soon as I hung up, guilt washed over me. I couldn't help but think of her, sitting at home. Still dismissing my pain, I felt like I was betraying her, somehow seeking help behind her back when she didn't even think I needed it. I hadn't even told her about the appointment yet. I couldn't bring myself to. The thought of her mocking me again like before was too much to bear. So I kept it to myself. When the day finally arrived, I sat in the waiting room, fidgeting with my hands, feeling like an imposter. The room felt sterile, clinical even, with its white walls and the faint smell of something that wasn't quite fresh, but not unpleasant either. I was about to pour my heart out to a complete stranger. It felt strange, awkward, almost like I was doing something wrong. But then, when I sat down in that chair across from the therapist, something shifted. I didn't know what I expected, but what I didn't expect was the sense of relief that washed over me the second I opened up. Just saying the words out loud felt like a weight was lifting, like I was finally allowed to exist in my own pain without judgment. I didn't know it then, but this was the beginning of something much bigger. And I couldn't help but wonder, if I had waited for her to help me, would I have ever found the strength to help myself? In therapy, I started to untangle the mess inside my head, things I had been avoiding for years. At first, it felt like I was just saying words to fill the silence. I talked about the exhaustion, about how I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing myself. The more I spoke, the more I realized how deeply I had been buried in this marriage, trying to keep it together, trying to make her happy, trying to hold everything up while I was falling apart. Inside, I talked about how every day felt like I was walking on eggshells, trying not to rock the boat. How I would ask for attention or affection, but it always felt like I was asking for too much. I wasn't allowed to need anything beyond what she thought I needed. The truth was, I didn't even know who I was anymore. All I knew was that I was exhausted, mentally and emotionally drained from carrying the weight of the relationship on my own shoulders. Then, my therapist said something that hit me harder than anything else she'd said. Your wife isn't the source of your pain, but she isn't helping you heal either. I froze. The words echoed in my mind like a slap to the face. It wasn't just that she wasn't the cause of my hurt, was that she was actively contributing to it. In her indifference, in her refusal to see my needs, she was keeping me stuck. I wasn't even mad at her for not understanding. It wasn't that simple. But the realization that she wasn't helping me heal, that she couldn't, or wouldn't, stung more than I was ready for. I had been trying so hard to fix something that wasn't just broken, but hollow. I had been waiting for her to change, to meet me halfway, but I was starting to see the truth. She wasn't going to change. She couldn't, and maybe, deep down, I had known that all along. I felt a wave of anger and heartbreak all at once. The woman I had built my life with, the woman I thought I was supposed to lean on, had never been the safe place I needed. And for the first time, I wondered if it was time to stop waiting for her to change. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was allowed to focus on myself. Therapy had given me that. Not just the permission to explore my feelings, but the space to remember who I was before everything got tangled up in this marriage. It was like dusting off a forgotten part of myself that had been buried under years of emotional neglect. I started with small things I had once loved but let slip away. I pulled my guitar out of the closet where it had sat untouched for months. It felt strange at first, the strings cold under my fingertips, but as I played, the rhythm slowly came back to me. The music flowed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. I remembered how much I used to enjoy it, how the guitar had been my escape during tough times. It wasn't just the music, it was me, reconnecting with a version of myself that had faded into the background. I also started hiking again. The quiet of the trails, the sound of leaves crunching beneath my boots, grounded me. I'd forgotten how much I loved being out in nature, just walking with no agenda other than to breathe and think. I didn't need anyone with me. I didn't need anyone's approval. It was enough just to exist, to feel the sun on my face and the wind in my hair. I began to realize something that had been lost to me for a long time. I was a person. I wasn't just a husband. I wasn't just someone's emotional caretaker. I was allowed to have interests, dreams, and desires of my own. The problem was, I had forgotten that. I had let the marriage consume me, convinced myself that my only role was to keep everything together. But as I rediscovered myself, my wife's indifference felt sharper. I would come home from a hike or a guitar session, filled with energy, only to be met with a blank stare or a quick dismissal. She didn't care about the little victories I was having. She didn't care that I was finding pieces of myself again. The lack of support, of connection, was more glaring than ever. I had been waiting for her to notice, to show interest in the person I was becoming. But all she saw was the version of me that had existed for Hertha, version that didn't ask for anything, the one that disappeared into the background. And it hit me then. She wasn't going to be the one to help me find myself. It was up to me. And I was finally starting to believe that I deserved to find that peace, even if it meant without her. A few months into therapy, I felt like I was finally starting to understand myself. I was more confident, more aware of what I wanted and needed. I had begun to recognize my worth, my own voice, and I knew it was time to share that with her. I sat her down one evening, nervous but determined. I needed her to know what was going on inside my head, to understand the changes I was going through. "Look," I began, my voice steady but uncertain. "Therapy's been helping me a lot. I've started to understand why I felt the way I did. I think I'm finally starting to find myself again." She didn't look up from her phone at first. She just kept scrolling, her eyes not meeting mine. When she did finally look at me, there was a coldness in her expression. "You're changing," she said, her voice hard. "You don't need therapy. You need me." Her words hit me like a slap. I stared at her, unable to process what I was hearing. This wasn't the response I had expected. It wasn't support, it wasn't understanding, it was something else. It was a rejection. "You think this therapy is going to fix everything?" she continued, her voice rising. "It's not. You're just trying to avoid facing the truth. There's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with me. You're just being dramatic." Her anger caught me off guard. I had been trying to share something vulnerable, something that was changing me for the better, and she saw it as a threat. I felt the emotional distance between us growing deeper than before. Her words didn't just hurt, they made me realize that she wasn't willing to change, to grow with me. She was clinging to a version of our marriage that I couldn't be a part of anymore. In that moment, something inside me shifted. I saw the truth clearly. I couldn't keep waiting for her to meet me halfway. She wasn't coming. I came home from therapy one afternoon, feeling lighter than I had in months. For the first time, I felt like I was finally moving forward, like I was starting to put the pieces of myself back together. I hadn't even made it all the way through the door when I heard her laughing. I paused, standing in the hallway, my hand still on the doorknob. She was on the phone with a friend, and I couldn't help but overhear the conversation. At first, I didn't think much of it. She laughed like she always did. But then I heard the words that made my stomach drop. "Oh, my God. He's actually going to therapy," she said, still chuckling. "Like it's gonna fix him. He thinks that's gonna help. It's all a waste of time." My heart slammed against my chest, and my body went numb. I stood there in the doorway, frozen, as her laughter rang in my ears. It was like I was hearing the woman I thought I knew, someone I trusted, someone I loved, mocking my vulnerability. My journey to heal. I had been trying so hard to make things work, to find a way to make her understand what I was going through. And here she was, belittling me for taking the steps to better myself. I felt humiliated, betrayed, and small in a way I hadn't before. It wasn't just the words that cut so deeply, it was the complete lack of empathy. The dismissiveness that hit me harder than anything else. That was when it hit me. The woman I married. The woman I thought would support me wasn't here anymore. She wasn't the person I needed her to be, and I couldn't keep pretending that she was. Something inside me broke, and I realized, for the first time, I was done. In that moment, standing in the hallway, everything shifted. It was like a light flicked on in my mind, and suddenly it all made sense. I wasn't broken. I wasn't this messed up person who needed fixing. I had been misunderstood, okay? And I had let that misunderstanding fester for far too long. I'd spent years trying to make her see me, trying to get her to love me the way I needed to be loved. I had been begging for validation, for affection, for the simple acknowledgement that I mattered. But the truth was, I had been begging for it from the wrong person. She wasn't going to give it to me. She never had, and she never would. I realized then that my journey wasn't about fixing her. It was about fixing me. I had been so focused on making our marriage work, so wrapped up in her indifference and dismissiveness, that I had lost sight of who I was. I had forgotten that I was a person, not just a husband or a caretaker for someone else's needs. I wasn't going to find healing in her approval. I wasn't going to find peace by waiting for her to change. The only person I had any control over was myself. But as empowering as this realization was, it also left a deep emptiness in me. There was a sense of loss that came with it, loss not just of a relationship, but of the future I had imagined. I had dreamed of growing old with her, of building a life together. Now I had to let go of that dream. But with that loss came freedom. For the first time, I felt like I could finally breathe again, like I was starting to reclaim the life I had given up for so long. I decided it was time to stop looking back. The past was a weight I had carried for far too long, and I was tired of letting it define me. I needed to start living for myself, not for the approval of someone who had never really seen me. So I made some changes. Small ones at first. I signed up for yoga classes, something I'd always been curious about but never had the time for. At first, my body felt stiff, my mind was racing, and it felt awkward. But as the days went by, I found peace in the stillness. It wasn't just the stretches or the breathing. It was the space it gave me to think, to clear my mind. I started reading more, diving into books that weren't about fixing relationships or trying to make things work. These were books about self-discovery, personal growth, and finding joy in my own company. It felt like a luxury time to focus on my own mind and soul. Without anyone else's expectations hanging over me, I met new people too. People who weren't part of my old life. People who didn't know the struggles I had faced or the role I had played in a marriage that was slowly suffocating me. These new connections weren't about replacing her. They were about rediscovering parts of myself that I had forgotten existed. I felt seen, and it felt damn good. My life was starting to feel full again, without her in the center of it. And that's when the truth hit me. I knew without a doubt that I wasn't happy in the marriage. I had been lying to myself, pretending things could change. Pretending I could fix something that had already broken beyond repair. I wasn't going to pretend anymore. I was ready to let go. She came home one evening like nothing had changed. The same smile, the same casual attitude. She dropped her keys on the counter and started talking about her day, expecting me to respond the way I always had. But I wasn't the same anymore. I wasn't the man who had quietly endured, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I stood up from the couch, my heart pounding but my voice steady. I knew this was the moment I had been avoiding, the moment when everything would finally come to an end. "I'm leaving," I said, watching her face freeze, her words faltering. "I can't keep living this way." I've found peace, and I'm not going to let anyone take it away from me." The silence that followed was deafening. She blinked, stunned, not knowing how to respond. Her eyes searched mine for some kind of reassurance, as if maybe I was joking. But I wasn't. I had made my peace, and it wasn't with her. "You can't be serious," she whispered, her voice trembling for the first time in years. She reached out like she wanted to grab me, hold me, stop me from walking away. But I stepped back, not out of anger, out of a deep need to protect the peace I had fought so hard to find. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad either. I was just done. This wasn't a fight. This wasn't even about her anymore. It was about me, about claiming the life I deserved, about living for myself for the first time. She stood there, frozen, watching me gather my things. Her confusion and shock were palpable, but it was too late. I had already made my peace. And for the first time, I felt free. Leaving was hard, there's no denying that. But staying would have been harder. It would have meant continuing to live a lie, pretending I was okay when I was suffocating, watching myself disappear bit by bit. I thought about the years I had spent trying to make it work, trying to change myself, trying to fix something that was never going to be fixed. But in that final moment, I knew I couldn't keep going. I couldn't keep sacrificing my happiness, my sense of self, just to keep the peace with someone who couldn't see me for who I was anymore. Now that I was gone, I could finally breathe. The weight of her expectations, her emotional manipulation, it was all gone. I no longer had to constantly justify my feelings or second-guess my every move. I was free. But as liberating as that freedom felt, there was a deep, bittersweet sense of loss. This wasn't what I had imagined for my life. I had envisioned a future with her, a life built together. I had dreamed of growing old with someone who would be my partner, my equal. But that dream was never really ours to begin with. It was mine, and I had to let it go. I looked around at the life I was starting to rebuild, new friends, new experiences, new hobbies, and it felt, gut. It felt right. There was hope again, a promise of what could be. I had a clearer sense of who I was and who I wanted to become. And for the first time in years, I was living for myself. It was painful, yes. It was sad, for sure. But it was the right choice. And deep down, I knew I would never regret it. I was finally walking towards something better. I'm stronger now, wiser, and more confident than I've ever been. Looking back, it feels like I've shed 100 layers of hurt, confusion, and self-doubt. Therapy wasn't just about fixing me, it was about rediscovering who I was beneath all of that. It was about peeling back the parts of myself I had buried. The parts I'd forgotten were even there. I never realized how much of myself I had sacrificed until I started digging deeper. I spent so many years trying to make her happy, trying to save a relationship that was never meant to be, that I lost sight of the person I used to be. But through all the pain, through the tears, I found something I thought I'd lost forever, myself, now. I look at the man I've become, and I can't help but feel proud. Therapy helped me heal, yes, but it was the strength I found within myself that really pulled me through. I'm no longer the man who waits in silence, hoping someone will see his pain. I'm the man who chooses his happiness, who values himself enough to walk away from what isn't right. And looking back, I'm grateful for that laugh, for the way she mocked me, dismissed me, because it pushed me to save myself. It woke me up to the reality that I couldn't rely on her or anyone else to give me the peace I needed. I had to find it on my own, and I did. I've moved on from the past. The hurt, the uncertainty, they're behind me now. I'm at peace, and for the first time in years, I feel ready. Ready for whatever comes next, with a heart that's whole again and a life that's mine to shape.